Chris, can you turn your mic on?
Yeah.
There we go, that's it. All right,
Do
thank
you want me to move it closer to me?
No, so just need to go ahead and sound. You gotta go.
Okay. Okay, so we are called to order at 11:08. All right, so just a quick review of minutes. Does anybody have any changes or edits to last month's minutes that Michael so graciously typed up? I have no changes. Does anybody else? No?
No,
Do we have a motion to submit these minutes?
sure.
Okay.
No, I can't.
And seconded? Okay, great.
You can still move
Yeah,
until
come
the end of
on.
the meeting, Rosie.
Come on. Okay, all right, the minutes are submitted. Okay, so moving on to the chair's report. I have a few things to share. So first off, it's that time of year where we need to submit our budget request.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to check in with everybody to see if there's anything that we can forecast for this coming year, expenses coming in or anything that we should maybe be taking on, something so I can kind of put together a budget request and proposal for the coming year. One of the things I'm going to add is a membership to the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. This was recommended to me by Megan Rideout in the state of Maine. Hi, Allison.
Hi.
It's not an expensive ad, but if we were to move to CLG status, which is probably not going to happen next calendar year, but hopefully is on the horizon, there's an annual training component to being a commission, and they offer annual training through them. So Chris and I had a pretty good conversation with Megan. But joining that, the NAPC is something I want to add to our budget. Does anybody else have any other budget items that we should be adding? Yeah.
For a couple of years, we had a membership in Maine Preservation, and it's like $50.
Mhm.
And then I think it ran out during COVID. But I think that's really an important ally for us, Maine Preservation.
Great. Can you forward me a link to that so I can renew that membership?
All right. So good to see you.
Come on. Nice haircut.
He's calling me out of the house.
All right. The chair would like to recognize Will Adams. So is there anything else that we've been seeing as, coming down the pike? Yeah.
I just think that with the ordinance and all that, the new ordinance and all that, there's gonna be a lot of,
Oh, you might want to turn on your microphone.
Do you want to hit yours, Pat?
No, you can't give it to me, and so people can. Makes
Might want to just turn on your mic now.
it makes it different. They're not really room microphones so much as individual microphones, so.
Okay.
Ann, do you mind hitting your mic too there? Thanks.
Yeah.
So with the ordinance?
oh, yes, I just think there's gonna be a lot of things that come up about that, and we might need some consultants and things like that, and also for the producing of it and advertising, et cetera, for its promotion.
I agree. Do you want to just take a stab at some of those specific consultants you think we might be wanting to recruit into
Well,
it?
if we bring in a consultant or a professional consultant to review it and things like that, a couple $1,000s might be.
I even not even on a budget requirement, but just as by title, what do you think are the persons that we're going to want to reach out to by skill or talent set? Like, what kind of like
Excuse
a
me, she just reminded me that I didn't put my hearing aids in.
oh
I saw them sitting there and I thought, oh, there's something that I forgot.
I mean, are you thinking legal consulting or?
Well, yeah, there might even be something like that, but I think that there's other minds out there that might want to pay for it.
I totally agree. in speaking with Megan, one of the things she pointed out, and obviously it's cart before the horse, but if we do achieve CLG status, if we're looking at Castine's ordinance as a template or as a good example, they had their ordinance and then they had their design manual, and that design manual was underwritten, she said, I think 60% by the state of Maine.
Yes.
So, and she also thought that if we do go down the route of having a historical preservation officer, somebody who handles administrative duties, that could also be underwritten largely by the state. So I agree with you. Yeah, that's a
What
great
is-
thing to look at.
What's TLG?
TLG, CLG,
CLG.
Certified
Oh.
Local
Government.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Sir, Chris, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I brought our budget request for 2019 the last time.
That's
and
fantastic.
Yeah, and I can give that to you. And in it, we had $1,000 for consultant fees
Mhm.
regarding assessment and development of a strategic plan for the town's historic records, which we never did.
Mhm.
Shelving units, $850, because we were talking about storage again.
Uh-huh.
An honorarium for speaker related to ordinance development, $250, and conference fees for members, $400.
Great,
So,
that's super helpful.
It's a little outdated because we aren't doing a couple of those things, but
Yeah,
What
some
year
things
was
to
that?
And a bus
2019.
for taking us all to Augusta to go visit the archives and find out what they're all about.
Showing our age.
You're working on the committee though, aren't you?
okay, great.
For
Thank
the
you, everyone. Anybody
plan.
else have anything to add as a potential budget item? I know down the road, some archiving software is something that we'll probably be wanting to look at, but I need to have further conversations with Ken. And there are other extra town resources that we might be able to lean on, like the main memory network and what have you. But that might be something that'll be coming down. Are any of the plaque costs something that are going to hit our budget for next year?
No, they're coming out of this year's budget, and I have a summary of that
Okay,
in my report
okay, great.
today.
The only other thing, and I was trying to look it up, but I think I need to be on a laptop. The National Trust for Historic Preservation used to have a certain kind of membership that if you were that member, you could apply for additional grants that you couldn't apply for if you weren't a member. I'll try and see what I can find out about it
that'd be
if it
great.
still exists. But
Great.
that gave you access to grant money that you couldn't get otherwise.
Is
And
that the NEA you said?
No, it's the National Trust for Historic
Okay.
Preservation.
Okay, because Megan also recommended that we look at into some of the NEA grants, that she thought some things there would be apply in terms of preserving public history. So that's something I'd like to look into. Fantastic, that's great. So a membership update. Rosalie has just informed me literally minutes ago that she is strongly considering, if not decided, to step down from permanent membership and move to volunteer status. So that will be opening up a membership slot. So that's something to for us to look at, and thank her for all her service, because I know it's been a long time and I know she's done so much for this town. So thank you so much. And we would miss you at every meeting. So thank you very much. Okay, good, good. And then also want to welcome Witter, who was voted onto the committee by the select board at their last meeting as one of our alternate members. And also I understand that Tricia was offered an alternate position, but I don't know that she has officially accepted it yet. But welcome to our new members. You know, by hook or by crook, we have Will Addis sitting at the table, and I'm hoping there might be a little juicy slot for him, but we're not pressuring him. So some membership updates there. And, you know, June's coming around, and that's when our terms kind of renew. So we'll be looking at that in the new year. Moving on to our historic preservation ordinance, we need to schedule a next step and a next meeting on that. I know Witter has shared with me some ideas. Chris and I had a meeting with Megan Rideout. So I'm going to distribute an email trying to set a time for our next meeting, but if people want to propose a date now, I'm thinking like 2 weeks from now would be good, although we do have Thanksgiving. Maybe there's something between Thanksgiving and Christmas where we could meet. And I'll after we pick a date, I'll tell you some of the updates. But generally speaking, do you like the daytime meetings when we do them at the library at 11, or do we like end of day? And is a Tuesday after Thanksgiving, something like that possible for people? I can't remember what date that is. Would it be the 28th? You're spot on. See, what are we going to do without that quick calendar reference there? Yes, the 28th. Is that a day that we should just put down as a tentative? Let's say an 11 o'clock at the library? Okay.
Do we do 10 or 11?
You'd rather do 10?
10, yeah.
10?
I have an
Okay.
appointment in the afternoon, so 10 would be better for me, though I
All
can
right.
change that appointment.
I'll check with Ken, but let's assume that we're having our next meeting on Tuesday, the 28th,
Okay. And we said 10?
10 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I've had 2 conversations. I wanted to give you guys just a little bit of update. Chris and I, at our last meeting on November 3rd, had a call with Megan Rideout, and she gave a lot of fantastic feedback, which we'll go over in detail at our next meeting. But some of the highlights were that she thought our current draft language had some things that she would flag if it was moving forward in terms of some of the language conflicted with some state and federal definitions. And it was her recommendation that we kind of start all over and use Castine's historical preservation ordinance as a template, essentially, and then customize it to our needs. In talking to her, one of the things that we discussed was some of the demolition issues that we faced, even just recently on Chestnut. And so she said that she thought Saco's demolition ordinance or article was something that we might want to look to pull into the Castine template as a really good example, and that might fit our needs. So that was, I think, one of the main highlights. She recommended us joining the NAPC. She referred us to the Main Memory Network as a resource for archiving history. One of the things she pointed out was that in the Castine ordinance, they have a section on ideas and ideals that she thought was really vague and poorly worded and not really appropriate to us, and she suggested pulling that. And she recommended that I talk to Sean, the town manager in Castine, which I have done. I followed up with him. So what I'm going to do for the next meeting is I'm going to take the Castine document. I'm going to do just a little bit of customization, not too much. Try and incorporate the Saco section on demolition, pull out that ideas and ideals section, and then post it online so that we can all look at it and start to put comments directly in it. So I'll probably do a Google Doc, but we'll do that before our next meeting so that people can start putting their feedback and we can start shaping it together as a group.
Okay.
And Witter raised some, he and I spoke last week, and he raised some very specific concerns, which I thought were good. And so we can get into that at our next meeting. In speaking with Sean in Castine, he first of all absolutely gave us his blessing to use the Castine language. He said we all steal from each other, so not an issue. He made a pretty funny joke about plagiarism, but so he's absolutely on board. There should be no issue there. He also shared with me a couple issues they had faced with their ordinance, and admittedly they're much smaller than we are, and they kind of face a different business dynamic. But he said one of the main selling points for the ordinance in Castine was that each tourist that they could divert into Castine, they would estimate was an additional $500 or more of tourist dollars into the town, and that preserving the character of the town was key to that kind of influx. We're in a slightly different situation here, but there's there's no question that tourist dollars and maintaining the aesthetic of the town is an important component of our
Mhm.
economics.
Well,
But again, I'll share more specific things he said in our next meeting.
now that, I mean,
Yeah.
Chestnut Street is one, from all the tourists that walk up and down my street, as a tourist, people drive from Cleveland to walk their dogs on my street, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So, you know, that preserving the character of Chestnut Street is probably helps the tourist industry. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And Rhonda, who I think, is Rhonda with us? Oh, okay. She last night shared with me some language that I thought was wonderful about positioning for the ordinance.
You
So-
know, it's kind of a strange little comment to put in here, but when I was working on the church restoration, one of the things that we really were, it's how we were able to get this big grant, was we talked about what a tourist attraction it was, and it was on the cover of the map of the town, and nobody had ever really measured how many people come to see that. And so one of the things we did to try and reinforce that was we got people to write reviews on TripAdvisor to bump that to like the top destination, you know, the top attraction in the little town of Abbeville. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's something that you could, you know, declare it as a historic district,
Mhm.
and every single one of us could write a review
Mhm.
of, you know, how important this is and how much we learn by walking along Chestnut Street.
Yeah.
And those things, you know,
Mhm.
it's like social media hits, you
Yep.
know, which I'm from the generation that don't really care that much about that. But the people who are making decisions now do.
Yeah.
And if we could do something like that in a number of places, and you can see I'm not mentioning Instagram because I don't use it, but we can talk to Alice, and I think she can help there. Or the thing formerly called Twitter, which doesn't agree with that you need to have good grammar, so I've never used it for that reason. But still, to get Chestnut Street, you know, as something that's talked about on social media,
Yeah.
would, you
Yeah.
know, expand the whole belief that this is really, really important to our community and to the tourism that comes in and feeds all of our businesses.
I think that's a great point. And we still haven't finished publishing our Chestnut Street walking tour. And perhaps there's a way in which that can be connected to a new social media presence that we would connect, but also maybe there is some kind of polling or information we could put on the tour itself to get feedback from people who take the tours. To your point. Now, Allison, do you know, has there ever been any actual like survey of the effect of tourism dollars on the town? Or do you know if that's something that exists?
Oh, there's been stuff done by the Chamber of Commerce in the past and different things about, you know, the effect of the Opera House, for instance. And I don't know that there's a need to convince people of the importance of tourism in Camden. I haven't seen that as a, and I mean, in fact, if anything, you know, there was a time when the town was putting money in the budget to try to make sure we were on the lists of the 10 most
Right.
exciting or whatever places to be, or the charming New England towns, or those lists that you see. And years ago, a decision was made not to like use town resources to actively market the town. Then there are all these other people that feel like we've got plenty of people here and we just need them to go away. Chestnut Street people are notorious for complaining about other people parking on their street, and have devised a variety of painting strategies objected to by other residents in town who will. So I don't know. I mean, if we need to go down the route of
Yeah.
promotion.
I was just wondering if there was an existing study that we could reference in terms of the impact of, but
I don't know about
Asking the
locally.
chamber.
I don't know about locally, but Jeremy Rickema in his book said that 80% of tourists are heritage tourists,
Oh, yeah.
meaning history tourists. So you know, there is literature that,
Of our tour,
In
80%
general.
of Camden tourists or,
no, it nationally,
oh, okay.
that
They-
80%
They
of
want to
people,
go look at old stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
but I remember that's in our notes
Yeah.
from earlier.
And, well, just from, people ask me about my house all the time, walking along the street. Yeah, so yeah.
Hmm.
It does seem like this issue is bubbling up in lots of different ways
Yeah,
around
no,
town.
But,
But I agree with Allison. I don't think we have to promote it. I think
No.
we can mention it in our literature, but certainly everybody I meet, no matter where I go, if they say, where are you from? Camden. Oh, I know Camden. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's out there.
Okay, so we will discuss in greater detail as we, in our actual meeting about the ordinance.
And I'm not really talking so much about promoting it
Yeah.
as to creating an argument in kind of dollars and cents terms. One of the things that the grant that the church got, it's an organization called Partners for Sacred Places. And one of the things in the grant is that they will come in and do an economic impact study. So if your church is like, a major tourist attraction, they will actually put dollars and cents onto how much is contributed to the local economy because of this, like one building or this one district or whatever like that.
The national places.
Well, no, this was a organization called the Partners for Sacred Places, and the grant was given by the Fund for Sacred Places, which is supported by the Lilly Endowment and is a joint program of the Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So it was simply like a tool
Yeah,
to promote historic preservation, because you don't want to tear down this building. You don't want to change the facade of it
Mhm.
if it is having this kind of economic impact.
yeah.
So,
So in terms of process, and again,
but maybe
we'll-
social media is not the
No.
way to go, but maybe it's some kind of study of the,
Yeah.
I'll talk to you more about that at some point.
Okay.
Not today, but
okay.
having to do with St. Thomas's
Yeah.
dilemma. Yeah.
Now,
so
with the
broad-
broad goal of is the broad goal here to prepare people so that they will vote in favor of a historic preservation ordinance?
I think
Is that
that's
sort of the,
a down the road goal. Like first we have to get an actual ordinance written that we think is effective and that all the
right?
people within
Right.
town in select board are on board with and what have you.
And you might want to do that a little bit in concert too, of like identifying what the barriers are in people's minds. I think that probably most people that are opposed to it would be that slippery slope thing, the fear of the property rights and
Yeah.
what I'm not going to be allowed to do.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's different for different communities and whether you're advocating for preserving a
Yeah.
town building or in that case, you might want to make the economic development case of the tourism. People come to see the church or not that wouldn't be a church, wouldn't be a town building, but it would be, I was talking to Jeremy a little bit before this too about like, okay, how do we make sure that committee members and town staff don't end up wasting a bunch of time
Mhm.
on this, as has happened in the past.
Yeah.
And so, looking at the gauntlet that you have to get through with the select board, it looks like we would have eliminated the planning board needing to be part of the process because it would reside outside of the zoning ordinance. But, just thinking about that, of course, the select board changes, but then, what are people saying? What are people going to say
Mhm.
about this? And then
Yeah.
where can we meet them there with that education so that we devise an ordinance that is
Mhm.
responsive? There's only so much you can do after the fact to try to convince people that they do want to have their windows regulated.
Mhm.
Just doing that in concert of saying, okay, what are all I know you did the tabling at the election a couple times ago.
Yeah.
So just,
I've been walking around talking to my neighbors and I'm beginning to get a really good idea of what what will get in trouble and what won't. Frankly, I don't need to say it now unless you want me to tell you. But
I'm sure we can all imagine for the most part.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I went to there was a meeting that was held in Bath because they were putting together the Washington Park Historic District. And this was, as part of the process, this was a public meeting to let everybody see what the proposal was. Michael Gerbalbain was there, and also to raise any objections. And what I found interesting was the public meeting was to reassure the owners that they could do anything, even if it was a historic district. They could put solar, they could change their windows, they could do all of this. But they mentioned that what could regulate that is an historic preservation ordinance. And they mentioned, you know, a town that had one. And they mentioned this ordinance that they have. It's a certificate of appropriateness, which is for the Bath Preservation Overlay Zone. And so it just struck me, and I immediately wrote it down because it struck me that it's kind of what you're saying. I mean, and that's the concern. And what I'm looking at is, as we move forward and making more historic districts like Jacobs Avenue, that, you know, one of the first things you do is you go and you get conditional approval from at least 50% of the neighborhood members. And what you do, how you do that is by saying, this is not going to regulate you in any way possible. But if we have a historic preservation ordinance that comes in and says, we're only going to regulate historic things that have been designated historic districts, that gives me pause as the person who's assuring them that everything's going to be okay. Should this preservation
doesn't me
ordinance
if I
come
live
in.
in the district. Just separating myself from the committee as someone who lives in an historic district, and actually in Santa Fe, I got really screwed because I wanted to put in insulated windows, and Santa Fe, they don't let you do anything because one of the longtime members of the historic commission is in the restoring window business. So they just don't let people put in windows, including having the town planning office say that insulated windows don't really work. You know, so the historic commissions don't have the best reputation because when they hit the news, it's always when they do something stupid. You never see in the news, oh, look what they did with this wonderful district. You see, you know, stories. What was the latest one I read? Oh yeah, somewhere in Virginia, they went after someone for tearing down a hurricane fence because it was an example of mid-century modern vernacular stuff. You know, and this hits the news and people read it, and so when the historic district comes in and asks for permission to regulate your neighborhood, they may have a negative idea about that.
Yeah, maybe somebody could come up with just a list of all
All
of these things that people say
yeah,
and parse out the
and answer
truth and the not truth and the, because that is what it's going to be. And it's not that the news doesn't report on the good stuff. I think it's that people just love the bad stuff, just to,
Yeah.
you know, it's more fun.
I think maybe we should just save this for an ordinance meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to do.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a side note, I had told you before that I had just dropped by the Christian Science reading room and just kind of talked with them in a very casual, unofficial way about is that space in there something that they would ever consider leasing or renting as a potential location for document archiving. And I know that this is not in any way an advanced real discussion. It's just essentially brainstorming. And I know there are other resources in like the Historical Society building and other avenues for us to explore. But just to let you know that their board did meet and talk about the possibility, and they're very receptive and open to that as an idea. So as we start to kind of like go down the road with talking about archiving facility and what we can and can't do, that's one thing that might be on the table. So there's that update. And as I told you, Megan Rideout pointed the main memory network, which I've been kind of going and looking at and playing with a little bit. And they have some really interesting ways in which they are digitally archiving media and people's personal histories and what have you. And so I'm hoping that as we look to archive Camden's histories, that we can maybe piggyback on an existing thing like that, or at least see what software and things that might be at our disposal to use here in town.
So
And,
quickly
yeah.
on that topic, I'm very passionate about digitizing and all that stuff too, and have started this whole thing. Janice is probably gonna roll her eyes over there because I took over for a while. I was really, really enthusiastic about doing a lot of stuff, and there's this whole area set up in
Yep.
the town office.
Yeah.
So that would be something that if the Historic Resources Committee could maybe help me get that under control.
Yeah.
And because it started where and I did do a lot, and I sent, I think, everybody the
Yeah.
folder of what I've done.
Yeah.
But then people, sometimes now things get put on that desk of the, what it's like, oh, maybe this could go to the library, or this could be digitized, or,
Yeah.
and I need to admit to myself and to others that I don't have time to keep it up. There was some money in the town budget for this. But it sounds like you've talked to Ken some, which is great. I know I keep beating this drum of the Historical Society, but we're really not a big enough town or a couple towns to have 3 different entities presiding over historic resources, or 4 different entities. And, the town has some stuff, the library has some stuff, the Historical Society has way more than any of those places combined. And we're trying to do some fundraising now for building needs. And Heather on our board is a senior archivist at the Maine State Archives. She has done tons of research into the software and talked to Ken some. She advocates for something called Collect It.
That's the name of it?
I think so, yes. I know there's a link to it on the Historical Society website. We do really need more volunteers and board members. Will, you would be just fantastic. And if you don't have,
Yeah.
not sure about getting involved in a town committee yet, how about quasi municipal? But anyway, it would if we could get somebody from this committee to agree, or Pat, since you're going to have extra time, and Mike, I keep telling them, well, yep, I've definitely mentioned it to the Scalings. They know they're invited. You're very popular people. So, but to try to have some coordination, even if there's not a commitment to we're definitely going to work together on this or that, but to have somebody on this committee that would be a liaison other than me. So we try to coordinate all of these.
Is there a vice versa? Is there somebody who's on other than you that would come to our meetings, and vice versa? We have a representative or liaison who goes to your meetings. How often do you meet? Is it somewhat uneven right now, or?
Yeah, and I'll say I've got a lot of family stuff going on with somebody in the hospital in and out, and so I'm failing a little bit at both this commitment and that commitment. So I'd be happy to forward the email thread to anybody that wants to follow along. But yeah, I'm sure there would be. Jennifer Gramada just joined our board at the Historical Society, and she's also on the library board.
Generally speaking, does the society meet once a month, or is it not?
We're
that?
meeting more. We're trying to form more committees right now to work on some different things. But yeah, it's it's historically been about a once a month thing. We've had a bunch of people turn over, kind of like this committee a little bit, people that have been on that board for a long time that are trying to pass the torch.
Well, maybe
a
if you
little
could
bit,
let us
but-
know when the next meeting is. Maybe a couple of us can attend and we can start to build some bridges, something like that.
Yeah, because we're going to be needing to raise a bunch of money for building improvements and for that indoor climate controlled storage, as well as the other things too. So it would be silly for any of us to work in a vacuum.
Yeah,
Ken Gross
absolutely.
is another person he's promised that when he retires, he might be willing to join that board too. So
Just a quick question. So how would you see the archives that you've been collecting for the town? I mean, just off the top of your head, how would you see us incorporating all these different resources? I know Chris, has advocated before for, we need a big meeting, and you talked about it, to come up with it. But just off the top of your head, what do you think should happen with the materials that you have, for example? Would you put them digitally and then give them to the Historical Society? Would you want to see them in?
I don't know what should happen to the physical items. Other people could figure that out, but when I started doing stuff, it's still in this moment, you can't look up the annual report for every single year of the town of Camden. We should be able to digitally look up, the keyword search, what was voted on at each town meeting. We should be able to search for the word Bach throughout all of our, official archives. You should be able to limit the search to different areas so that we basically know what we've done in the past. We forget as a town the decisions that have been made in the past, and some of those are pretty darn recent, actually. So to me, it's taking all of those official town documents, ideally adding Rockport's stuff from when Camden and Rockport were together, adding that to a digital database, just so that we've got our official history somewhere. And then adding more to that over time with different, all the work that, every report that the Historic Resources Committee has had or been involved with. There's that Elm Street thing. There are all these things that are useful to people that come along later on. Like I spent all this time digging up old Harbor Committee reports from the 80s that it's like, oh, wow, look, they already cited this. We already have all this information. We already have this. So that's what I would hope. And any number of right now it's on OneDrive, and I can search for a lot of it, but making that more professional. And then having some kind of a shared table of contents index. So whatever we have in the different places, different organizations might, the library might always want to keep certain things in the Walsh History Center. That's fine. There always will have to be certain things here. But so we can look up and say, these are all the things that pertain to the town. This is where they are in some kind of central place that then takes you to other places.
Okay.
So I think the first thing with the town is just having every single annual report. Made a lot of progress, but not completely.
Okay,
So-
well, as you're talking, I'm thinking that would be a great job for a historic preservation officer, to handle that and to handle,
Administrative.
administrative things for if we ever get the ordinance together. Yeah.
Or, we're talking about we will eventually need to hire an executive director for the Historical Society. Or, how could those things that are the history-related needs in the community, how could we pool our resources? So that, because we just don't have enough money to do it, or interest.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, thanks.
yeah, and maybe the Historic Resources or Historical Society could be play a role in a historic preservation ordinance too. Maybe I just think there has to be more integration between the.
And I don't think there have been barriers before. It's just that we've had two different missions in terms of this committee was pretty much assigned to work with the town and the town's historic resources, but it kind of kept itself separate from the Historical
Historical.
Society. But I don't think that,
It's mostly, none of it's really been on purpose. It just
No,
takes so much work to
exactly.
figure out how to integrate it,
it's the way
that it's easier to
evolved,
stay
yeah.
in.
So
Yeah.
We went through all of these machinations when this committee was first formed in the early 90s, and then the Archives Committee started work I think it was 94, and what to collect and who should collect it. And we kept sort of going into the domain of the Historical Society when people wanted to collect social history, for instance.
Oh.
Families, who did that, whose family lived here when, and what house did they live in, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And then we had really enough to do, though, with just documenting the town-owned properties.
Right, and that's what our charter says, or
Yeah.
right, that it's town-owned historic.
Collecting and preserving the drawings and the correspondence with respect to those properties. So then we, sort of gave up, anybody who wanted to do genealogy or who wanted to do artifacts or social history, we kind of said, the Historical Society might have something.
Oh. And I think they did at one point, there was a really active organization for a while. And so that's interesting to hear you say that, because there are these file cabinets over there that are all just clearly family related. And it's like last names, and you look through and it's all these different last names. And they just have a folder, and some of it's oral histories. And so probably that was the delineation at some point, like this kind of stuff goes to the Historical Society. But
Mhm.
nobody knows that anymore, and
Mhm.
nobody can find, it should all be digitized at least somewhere.
Mhm.
I can't even find the correspondence about some of the town-owned historic properties unless I can go over to the Walsh History Center during the hours of whatever, and so.
Has anyone looked at grant funding for doing this? I mean, so we could actually hire a resource or resources to focus on it. I'm just wondering if the Historical Society has looked at that, or I don't think we.
Right now, our major thing is the leaking roofs. But there's been talk about that. And there is, in the town budget, there's still money that we've been carrying forward every year. It's not enough to hire like a full-time person, but it's enough to get a start on we were going to use it to pay one of the custodians he was doing a bunch of digitizing. He was going to help me finish it, like during COVID. And then, so there's several $1,000s at least. I forget exactly how much. But if we could find a use for some of that would help, maybe there's somebody that can create a plan, or it's just a matter of somebody needing a little bit of money to come in, because it's under the category of digitization of town archives or something like that.
Is the Historical Society accepting donations now, or have they been in recent years? Because, I met with Mark Ingraham, who had his father's papers that evidently filled like a whole barn or something. He had so much information, and Mark in the family got them because he happened to have built a garage with a big space above it. And so his siblings said, "Oh, well, then you can take all of this." So he gladly gave me 2 boxes to leaf through for Jacobs Avenue stuff, but said to me, "Do you have any idea where I can donate these things?"
Mm.
And that's another reason I think that, he's pretty well known around town and didn't even think of the Historical Society. So I wonder if that's another thing, that trying to beef up the Historical Society and get a good facility, we can get donations from families all around town, because certainly, nobody told Stephen Ritterbush's wife, and she took all the papers and burned them at the dump. And I'm still sorry about that. So there's just a lot of stuff out there that if everybody knew this is a repository that will keep them safe. I have another friend who has a bunch of quilts that are all New England based.
You have a whole quilt exhibit.
Really?
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because she
Yeah.
wants to know where to donate them, or, if she could give them and have them sell them as a fundraiser. I'll
You
talk
should
to
send me an email that like says a couple of these
Okay.
things and I will forward it on to Jan Kelsey and some, she's the new chair and, yes, we have all kinds of newspapers too. There's the Camden Advertiser, which predated the, Camden Herald, which I've never seen anywhere else. And there's a box of that stuff there, but it's,
Call you from
There's
lunch.
tons of stuff there.
Okay.
there is, yeah. And we do have a staff person there too that we're paying right now. So coming up with some kind of shared responsibility thing.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm a retired software engineer, so if someone wants to look at software they're trying to sell us, I can do that.
Okay, great.
Hmm.
All right, well, let's, moving on, this kind of overlap to the select board liaison report. You kind of hit a lot of things.
Good at
but,
hijacking stuff.
No.
Where are we?
So some of the things I had noted just from the select board meeting was the zoning peer discussion, which I know there was a meeting this morning.
Mhm.
So I'd love an update on that, and also the tannery discussion that kind of took place.
Oh, I can totally connect the tannery to historic resources, if you want me to, but, okay, so yes, the peer, moratorium and zoning discussion is making its rounds again. Poor Jeremy. It's been, as new people become involved, his direction has been redirected multiple times, partially by me, but there was a meeting with, or a workshop with the planning board and the harbor committee. The planning board is ready to recommend no additional private residential piers or hard structures in the outer and coastal harbors. The outer harbor, in large part because of just congestion, and then the coastal harbor, really a lot of that having to do with some of the stuff that Will brought up with the maintaining the natural aesthetic. That was a very compelling argument for the planning board of saying, okay, well, we have this whole stretch of natural coastline. Let's preserve that as kind of a natural historic landmark, or I forget, there was wording that the National Park Service actually has for all of that. And the harbor committee was less focused on that and more on, well, it's not very congested out there, so what's the harm? And most people don't build piers out in that outer, Penobscot Bay facing area, so why do we need to regulate that? And the select board is kind of divided on our memories of who was tasked with what. And there's been some evolution of different select board members, and we're all the liaison to different committees, and so we each think our committee is the most important one to weigh in on whatever topic it is. And so there's a lot of that. Nobody's doing anything on purpose. We had the joint discussion was pretty good. The next steps are for the planning board to have I think another workshop that's going to be on Zoom.
There's a meeting this morning.
There was a meeting this morning where we talked, and the typical objections came up from people like me that say 8 o'clock in the morning or a meeting that nobody gave us any real notice to is not an easy time for us all to meet, to just show up at a harbor committee meeting, and there's not enough time. That's not a way to be able to tell the Conservation Commission they can weigh in. Everybody's kind of confused about when the appropriate time to weigh in is. So, but there was a lot of discussion that was maybe be worth watching if anybody's interested. But the next workshop that's going to be, the planning board does in my opinion, a quite good job of letting people talk and stuff. So whenever, I forget if they set a date for the workshop or not, but it was very much like the Harbor Committee will be there, and if the Conservation Commission wants to be there too, and the Historic Resources Committee, and we'll say commission someday, then that could be, and you can submit comments written also. But now they're at the point where they want to also prohibit bulkheads and
Breakwaters.
breakwaters, private breakwaters. None of this would pertain to public or commercial stuff, but just the private residential. Believe it or not, there have been private residential breakwaters.
Kidding.
Yeah, I was
There are,
surprised by
they kind of look like they're part of things now because so much seaweed has
Yeah,
grown
okay.
up.
Huh.
But
I
yeah,
wouldn't think they'd let you do that anymore. Just-
I would hope not, but
Yeah, you never, yeah.
yeah, I mean, bulkheads, like when you get houses that are going to end up falling in,
Oh, okay. that-
what
yeah.
what should property owners be allowed to do? Can they, as they built really, really close to the ocean, should they be allowed to do anything to protect their house from falling in? Or at some point, is it like, well, no, there are winners and losers in all of this, and the loser can't always be the public beach. You can't build a bubble around your flooding house. So as much as that may or may not pertain to the Historic Resources Committee, some of the properties are historic that might be in danger.
Yeah.
And so then you look at what's the historic part that we want to preserve? Is it the natural coastline? Is it that, that house that's always been right there?
Well, I have a question for you and Will. So what is the language around preserving the harbor? And is a historic district something that can apply to a harbor? Or I'm just curious, what are the,
Natural areas.
I think I can send it to you. It's a National Park Service. I believe it's a national landmark or national landmark where you could designate a natural,
Thing,
yeah, as a historical
Yeah.
landmark.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think I've read, sections of river it happens to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the questions that gets asked on these applications when there are things being proposed to be built. Like, is it within a certain distance, or can it be seen from a
Mhm.
national natural landmark or so
So it's on the National Park Service. It says the National Natural Landmarks Program recognizes and encourages the conservation of sites that contain outstanding biological and geological resources.
Mhm.
Sites are designated by the Secretary of the Interior for their condition, illustrative character, rarity, diversity, and value to science and education.
Mhm.
The National Park Service administers the program and works cooperatively with landowners, managers, and partners to promote conservation and appreciation of our nation's natural heritage.
has Camden ever applied for any status for our harbor at either the state or federal level to designate it as a landmark? Or
Not
I
that
don't
I'm
think
aware.
so. But it's very similar. It's the same agency that does the historic districts that we're,
Yeah.
and so that's where I think it would fall under this. We've looked like Mount Batty, and the Mount Batty, there's some discussion about who came up with the idea that we wouldn't have buildings on the top of our mountains, and Chris Glass has gotten credit for that, but I think Beatty decided it was you guys that did
Yeah.
that.
Beatty heard him say whatever it was that he was being given credit for, but I don't think he remembered that he had done it.
So,
well,
so I'm totally confused now. So the things that we voted on at the warrant,
I know, it's terrible.
is
Yeah.
that just,
Did that pass?
yeah,
it did pass. Yeah.
It did, and so that was
passed, but now,
what that did, because we've had this moratorium,
Yeah.
right? And so they've been working on an ordinance as an answer to the moratorium. There were when the planning board came up with their recommendations to prohibit new structures and blah, 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 what Jeremy said was that at that point, there was time to get it, there wasn't time to get that whole thing on the ballot because of the ordinance language that would have to be developed. But some on the select board and maybe others were eager to move forward on some of it, not wanting to just have a blanket moratorium, which also prevented people from, I believe, certain types of repairs or raising up their existing piers. So they crafted this sort of complicated language that allowed voters to approve certain changes to the harbor ordinance
Mhm.
without ending the moratorium. Normally, when you pass an ordinance, it ends the moratorium because,
That was on the ballot?
yes,
That was the part I didn't understand, yeah.
a lot of people didn't, like, a lot of people said, I thought didn't we just vote to prohibit new piers? So,
Like the change was the rising, like the.
yes,
the-
and so what we voted on was to allow those changes to happen where people can raise their existing piers, but the parts of the ordinance that were, or excuse me, the parts of the moratorium that were not addressed by the ordinance changes will remain in effect. So it still prohibits new pier applications.
Okay.
But yeah, the majority of people are, there's just no chance of understanding where we are in the process.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the committee's jobs, or just to try to help people
Mhm.
know.
So both from a practical and political standpoint, is it under our auspices to do something like apply for the national landmark? Is that something that we would take on as a project? And is there appetite for that? And
What about the Conservation Commission?
Conservation or harbor even.
No, I don't think it's going to be the harbor committee, not this harbor committee.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the time what the committees take on is what is within their purview is sometimes it's what they choose to have in their purview. And sometimes the select board decides to say, we didn't tell you to do that. And I wish I could give you like a stronger answer, but the official purview of the Historic Resources Committee, which should probably be looked at, is to advise the select board on town-owned historic properties. So if you want a strict interpretation
Mhm.
of that, you would say it's Wells Opera House and the Village Green and the library and
building sites,
So-
designed landscapes, prehistoric sites, and materials.
does it say that in the,
Okay.
Say it
Yes.
again.
Maintain a record of,
that might just be the policy on the, but so you can say, well, it's a potential, anything is a potential town historic property or, I don't know how much work any of this is or isn't. So, it would be maybe something that somebody could look into and say, okay, how much time does this take or not? I don't know what the,
do you think
But-
there's an appetite for it in the town?
I think it would easily pass if you did it, somebody got all the work together to say, do you want to make this section of, people think the geology of the whole area is special
Yeah,
and blah, blah,
absolutely.
blah. But sometimes the amount of work, I don't know what the amount of work is to get it to that point, and it might just be worth at this point saying,
Just put in this committee, is there somebody who would want to take this on as a pet project and look into the process of that application? Yeah? Yes, that'd be fantastic.
As a volunteer, I don't know if I can, but I'm happy.
Sure you
So I
can.
just looked up, there's 14 national natural landmarks in Maine today.
Mhm.
One is Appleton Bog,
oh,
Atlantic White and Cedar Stand. That's like Appleton, it's all under one. I don't know,
wow.
Have you been or?
I don't know that I
So-
have.
Carrying Place Cove Bog, Colby Marston Preserve, Crystal Bog, Gulf Hagas, am I pronouncing it?
Haggis.
The Hermitage, Monhegan Island,
The
Mount-
Hermitage. We have
Mount
Hermitage.
Bigelow, Malcatawden, New Gloucester Black Gum Stand, number 5 Bog and Jack Pine Stand, Orono Bog, I'm going to mispronounce this, Pasadumkeag, Pasadumkeag Marsh and Bogland, Penny Pond, Joe Pond Complex.
Seems a bit-
We love our bogs.
Yeah, I know. It does seem bog heavy.
What about Acadia?
It's interesting. It's just Wikipedia, so I'm sure there must be.
I mean, Katahdin.
Katie is a national park, so,
Yeah.
it's pretty well protected
Yeah.
somewhat.
I mean, why, it seems like the
Except
Camden
for
Harbor
cars.
is a natural for that list.
It's all just a matter of whoever puts work into things like it, it's like what Pat and Mike have done with getting the tower and a lot of the time it's just, you can get them on the list if somebody in the community puts a bunch of time and energy into it. And
But I do want to say hi to Rhonda because I see her up there.
Hi, Rhonda.
So, I have to leave. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Okay.
So interesting, all these conversations. Before I went, I wanted to just applaud these two people who have done so much to get the tower back at the bank, which is wonderful. I mean,
Someone told me they
Thank
actually
you.
saw it too.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you.
They were very excited.
Thank you,
We want to
Rosalie.
see you here.
So Will, do you want to do some just tentative,
Absolutely.
starting out application and report back to us? And maybe that's something that'd be fantastic. Great.
I'm new to it, so it'll be a learning experience, but I'm
Awesome.
happy to share. Maybe it's best to do a shared document, like you mentioned,
Sure.
and then just to put the discovery. And I might reach out to someone at Appleton to see, just because it's so close, maybe go visit the site to see.
This would be very unique because I think it's the only piece of coastline that, on that list.
On the list, yeah.
Mhm, yeah,
We have a 3,000-mile coastline
Mm-hmm.
here. So
and then I wonder, yeah,
And it's a federal, would you
Yeah.
do the coastline to be a federal water, well, I guess
I
you
mean,
get the
that's,
property rights are
uh,
interesting because you,
I just wonder if, is there any way you can look up and see if any other states have them?
yes.
Yeah.
I did, the first one I pulled was Arizona, so I do believe other states.
Yeah,
Are in
well,
this
that
one.
would be, that's like the seacoast of Bohemia, yeah.
Thanksgiving.
But,
So
no, there must be somewhere, yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I mean,
Maybe
well, Cape Cod is a
maybe
national
it's
feature.
kind of exploratory, don't,
can be here.
Yeah.
they will. Maybe just kind of exploratory,
Take care,
kind of
Rosalie.
look at
Yeah.
kind of the big
Give me a call
picture
if you need
before
something.
you invest a whole lot
Like,
of
I don't even know
time.
what the benefits
Give us a call. if you
would
need
be
something.
if you're,
thank
or
you
what the
so much.
limitations might be, or so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you'll find
Um,
out.
Yeah,
Did
I'll
you
find
have anything else you wanted to report? Did you want to talk about the tannery at all or
I don't know if the Historic
Okay.
Resources Committee wants to drag themselves into that or not.
To what?
It's a,
I did think that your comment that you mentioned to me over text message is that the farmer's market is the oldest farmer's market in the state of Maine.
yeah, that was said at the meeting. I found
I
that
mean, yeah.
really
but
interesting.
it needs a little.
Well, we live in
evolvement too,
such
but-
an incredible regional network of farmers that, I went to Freedom, Aaron French's farmer's market this past summer, and it was wonderful. And I just thought that we could do something, like, I think we could beef up our farmer's market here just because we have so many local regional farmers around. And I just wonder if, I'm gonna go here, but like with the hazardous waste that's happened at the tannery, I just wonder if people don't feel safe as that being a location for someone to then
Mhm.
even walk on, or so it just feels a little
Yeah.
bit,
It's been officially remediated.
it has been. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
there's
it's all
always
safe.
room for improvement.
Completely safe.
It's
if
completely
you
safe, really?
Go near the riverbank. I mean, you wouldn't want to grow vegetables there, but
Okay,
it's.
but it is deemed safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
We'd love the farmer's market to expand and they have not wanted to.
They've not
Um,
wanted to. Okay.
They,
interesting.
like, it's very tough to get them to be there on Wednesdays.
So is there a whole committee for that farmer's market? Like a,
No, there isn't, but they're their own entity. You should reach out to them. The president changes pretty much every
What is
year.
that?
But
It's so great because if
Oh,
that
yeah,
site's
people-
clean, it's walk from town.
I think a lot of, this was clarified at the meeting as well, that I think a lot of people assume that pile of dirt is something that's being remediated, but it's not. That was fill.
it was thought that could be used for something. And
Okay.
I mean, there's stuff that, yeah, that's totally fine. That's really just marine clay that came from the middle school when they did their excavation. There's this whole Tanner Information Center on the town website, which gives like 5 million documents.
That's fabulous.
One of the cool things though about all these studies is that they've looked at all the old Sanborn maps, and looked at like the glacial till and the history of fill. And it's probably one of the most studied areas in town. Like you can know like the history of the geology there if you read like the phase 1 environmental report. So it is someday, hopefully we'll really tell that story of like the glaciers came through and then we built 105, and then they built the mill and then they did this and you're standing on, all this stuff. But historical signage is something that this committee hopefully will take on one day, but
Cool.
we sort of have, but.
All right, so we move on. Okay, great. So moving on to old business, Chestnut Walking Tour. I'm looking at you, Rhonda, up on the screen. Anything to report?
Well, last time we talked about this in September, I guess, we were getting Adventure Advertising to help us with making that paper printout, the fold out thing. And I thought there was another suggestion of maybe not doing it in paper. I think you talked about that, Chris. And so I kind of set it aside because I didn't want to keep pursuing that with
Yeah.
Adventure Advertising because it would require a front cover that would have to be designed and the redoing the map, which I had already done, but Miranda was going to help with the rest of it. But I thought that you, particularly Chris, felt that we should make more of an effort to do a digital version. So I kind of left it at that. And then many other things intervened. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, my thought was it seemed like the document was getting really difficult to lay out with the folds and how much content there was. And I wondered if there was some way to pare down the content so that it was mixed, a paper copy that you've got that's smaller and streamlined, and then digital information that could supplement it.
Right.
But maybe
Well,
when you return to town, do you want to meet and talk about that?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I did pare down the content so that we could fit it on their standard fold
Oh.
out sheet, which they gave us dimensions for. So I had already done that and then, I thought that the committee was reconsidering the whole thing and wanted to make it digital, which is fine. I think it's a good idea. I'm just not sure what the next step is.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think my personal opinion is that it should not be entirely digital. There should be something that you can grab in the town office and go for a walk and an actual brochure there. And I didn't know you had gotten it down to a workable size on their standard format, which is great news. Did they dummy up that by any chance? That we could see it?
I think I told Miranda to stop because I thought the message was we want to look into making it digital before we finalize anything or design a cover or any of that.
Well, what are people's thoughts on that? I don't think it should be entirely digital.
No.
No.
Getting that much information on a cell phone is not easy at all.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, pretty much, if you ask me right off the top of my head, I don't think you can do it.
Well, it would be in pieces. You wouldn't have to look at the whole thing at
Yeah, I
once.
know.
It would be in pieces according to address. And other towns have done it.
Okay, I mean, it's possible, but it's a lot, it's not, it's possible, but it's more work than you think, that's all. I mean, you think, when someone's got to do, we have to find probably some sort of software that'll do it for you and then work with the software and,
Well, I think
If-
that we've already been through this discussion, but the library had a system whereby you could use QR codes and walk around and then
Okay.
when you clicked on the QR code, it would go to a
Okay.
storage place, a website or
Mhm.
something. So
Okay.
it's possible, and I thought, Chris, that you were putting this out there because you were looking at the town website or the committee website and thought maybe we could use space to do this kind of thing there.
Yeah, my thinking was that we would use a QR code to link to a website to give more in-depth descriptions of the properties, and that the brochure itself would basically be a picture of the property with a one-line description of them. So we got a really
Kinda.
pared down
Yeah.
piece of
Or-
paper that you're walking with. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I've even seen brochures that had the QR code, the picture and the QR
Yeah.
code.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have something you can steal, it becomes a lot easier.
well, when you get back, let's take a look at where you're at and figure this out, figure out a next step. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I certainly would like to see it through to the end, regardless of what the final product is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of time went into it.
Oh my God, yes. But a budget question. Is the printing and costs associated with that going to hit last year's budget, or will that be something to anticipate?
I haven't initiated it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
because Miranda, I told her to stop.
Okay,
And I don't think they've charged us for anything yet.
okay.
And she's done many things for the town, so she kind of knows how it works.
Great. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Just speaking from
yeah.
my background,
Yeah.
as career was in tourism and tourism development, and it's interesting I'm very much for the hybrid solution, that there is something in paper. For many destinations that I used to work mainly with international travel, but it's the older crowd that does a lot of the traveling. I think it's probably not as much so here, but nonetheless, they're still pretty wedded to the paper. But what's interesting is when you see all of these companies that have gone to QR codes, you still see tourist brochures.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
that's just, they have not adopted uniformly. There's still, people want to go, they go to the Chamber of Commerce, the Tourist Information Center, and pick up brochures.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think
Yeah.
it's vital to have a
Yeah.
paper one. I just wanted to. put
I
that
mean,
in there.
even you're forgetting just the functional aspects of it, just the promotional aspect of it. You don't know what exists without
Yeah.
that brochure. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. St. Thomas Bell Tower. Anything to discuss there?
Be really quick. Last meeting, I was asked to write to Elizabeth Moran, who's the interim warden for St. Thomas Parish, and just offer her the name of the person who was doing the historical, whatever, conditions assessment
historic plan,
and historic plan for Curtis Island. So I did. I wrote her a letter. I sent her Annabelle's contact information, and I didn't hear back from her, but at least they have it if they want to pursue it.
Okay. All right. So I think we should just give the floor to the Scalings here, because I think the all next three items are all things that relate to you. So
Curtis Island, just, things are moving along in terms of the Curtis Island Lighthouse Foundation. As we
Oh.
reported last time, we have 501c3 status. We're working on a memorandum of understanding with the town, and that's getting pretty clear from the foundation's perspective. And the next steps will be visiting with Audra and Jeremy and then the select board. And in terms of where we're going with that.
I know, not to sidetrack you, but I know you had to put a hold on some of the renovations with the roof was going on.
Oh,
Is-
okay,
is
yeah,
the
let me
winter
tell
gonna
you
be an
about that.
issue, or-
So, the roof, we did a temporary repair, that's all done, so it is secure.
Oh, good.
Casey Leonard and Tom Albertson, their company who did a temporary patch, did another temporary patch, but this time we feathered in similar types of shingles. And I've spent quite a bit of time with Chris Farley in the FEMA report and trying to make sure we get some resources out of that, and saying the temporary fix is not the final fix.
Yeah.
And that was what I did last week.
Wow.
So anyway, it is, makes me feel better that it is tight now and it's safe for winter storms,
Awesome.
hopefully. And hopefully what's up there will be stable in the storms we're likely to get.
Great.
The plan is still to remove the whole roof and redo, all the woodwork around it, which is failing, and that was one of my points that, fix the shingles, but the broken gutters and fascia boards and other materials are in bad shape. So anyway, that's part of the plan, the restoration and preservation plan that will take place.
Great news. Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. I've submitted through the foundation. It makes it easier to submit for grants. And I may have reported on this last time, but submitted from the Maine Lighthouse fund that is generated off lighthouse license plates. And so I was called, said, why don't you submit a grant for whatever you need to do? And so the grant that I submitted was for $25,000, and it's to help pay for what Pat just mentioned, the group that will do a full architectural preservation plan. And that plan will lay out enough details so contractors will know just what to do, what to bid on, and how much to bid.
And you should hear by the end of December.
Yeah, and so I got a call. I was supposed to hear like last week, and I was hoping to come here and say, yeah, we got it. So I got a call and say the state doesn't have the resources to process all of this as quickly as we thought. So I think we're hopefully still fine, and hopefully we'll get that.
Great.
Would that same money help with actual doing stuff?
Pardon?
Could you get restoration money from the same source?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and that'll be probably another year.
Right, yeah, oh, yeah, I know it would take time, but yeah,
And
cool.
meanwhile, we're starting to look at grants.
Mhm.
We're getting donations without really going out and doing a hard push on them. Because we want to get our foundation fundraising plan
Mhm.
together. Just had a nice donation last week, which we can use however we want. So there's a lot of.
But you haven't gone public
There's a lot
yet.
of people that are ready to give.
Good.
We just haven't gone public. And we don't really want to go public with it until
The select
we've
board.
dealt with the town. And, we're not going to just sail off in one direction without the town.
Great.
So I wanted to share, you probably are very familiar with this, but there's such an interesting lighthouse, like history of preserving lighthouses effort in this Camden Rockport area. I've become close with Peter Ralston, and he shared a lot about his Maine Lights program, which is now part of legislation, which how nationally recognized properties move from the government to, I think it's town or private owners. And Jamie Wyeth did two paintings, Iris at Sea, for fundraising of the Maine Lights program. And the one with the yellow background was for the museum, the Lighthouse Museum in Rockland. And so I just wanted to share, I just thought that was such a neat effort that is now nationally recognized as the legislation. That was, you know,
That legislation was not part of when the town acquired the island in 1973,
Okay.
but it was when it acquired the light tower
the town.
in 1993. So it's been a great model, and
Yeah. I think he was just awarded with some like Light Keeper of the Year. Peter was last week or
Okay.
something like
Oh.
Peter was?
that. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Um,
Great.
Neat.
And the plaque and the two plaques?
Oh, wait. Okay. I typed up a report for both the tower, Mount Betty Tower plaque and the Great Fire plaque. And I just wanted to give you a brief history that we started in January of 2018 when I first emailed Walt Whitcomb at the state and said, I think Mount Betty Tower needs a plaque, 2018.
Wow.
And then, you know,
To be on the register.
to be on the register, to get on the National Historic Register, actually not to get a plaque, but to be nominated for the register. And so Michael Goebel-Bain from Maine Historic Preservation Commission completed the application for us because we were not a commission, we were a committee, so we couldn't fill out the application for a National Register property. So he did that, he finished it in 2018, and by December, which was, you know, about a whole year later, we were approved by the state park, the National Park Service, and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And then it wasn't until early 2019 we envisioned putting a plaque on the tower, and I have to say that there were two volunteers at the time, Michael Scaling and Dennis McGurk, who said that they would take that on. And really it's been, Dennis helped at first, but then he stopped volunteering with the committee and Mike just finished up. So I wanted to recognize Charlene Sunshine Hood, the Camden Hill State Park Director, who helped with the siting the stone and preparing the hole. Rockport granite owner Joshua Carl donated the large granite stone, and his person on site, Jen Grass, helped us select the stone. Tom Jackson from Jackson Landscaping donated his considerable services, and two men, he transported the stone from Rockport to the top of the mountain, secured it with a truck, a bobcat, gravel, time, and his expertise. And the total cost of that plaque was just for the bronze plaque itself. Everything else was donated by people at the town. It cost $416.80 for the bronze plaque.
Well, now I know if I need a bronze plaque, how much it costs. God.
Yeah, yeah, those plaques are not cheap. But anyway, imagine what it would have been if we hadn't had all those wonderful donations. Then the last one, the Great Fire Historic Marker, was placed on October 25th or 23rd, I think. $520 for the design for Adventure Advertising, $275 for cobblestones. The granite post was again donated by by Rockport Granite. The steel plate for mounting the actual platform onto this post was made by donated by Sam and Bill Glover of Rockport Steel, you know, a custom-made steel plate piece. Camden National Bank donated obviously the site. And then Tom Jackson donated his trailer, which Mike drove, which was crazy, but anyway. And Rick Seibel and the town crew erected the post. So there were so many people who contributed that I just think you should know that we live in this generous town. The total cost of the Great Fire District plaque was $795. And so anyway,
Adventure Advertising worked with us on that.
Yeah. So I just
Many
wanted to
renditions.
publicly thank Mike because he put up with me nagging him all the time, like, well, move it the next step, move it the next step. And you know, I will say that I spent a lot of time on that granite site walking over big pieces of granite, but really it was Mike who made this whole thing happen.
I liked it so much out there. I want to get a job out there. I mean, it's so exciting to see these huge stones.
Yeah.
that-
So take your business to these people. if you
I hope everyone has
I've
seen
got
both sites.
I put together just a short video
Oh.
here.
Chris, there's a, I'll
thank
file that.
No, if you
Or
just
just
move
next
to
time.
see it.
Mm-hmm.
Janice, is that something you can?
Oh, here are some pictures if you want to pass them around.
I've not seen
So we're probably taking too much time, but
No, this is great.
go
Thank
for
you.
it. Anyway, Mike.
Can you see that, Rhonda?
Can you see the stone? on the.
Yes,
split
I can see it.
Okay.
Oh,
That's
this is-
before
this
it
is-
went in the ground.
That's Mount Betty?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's the.
We were trying
So
to,
there'll be
Oh,
several
oh.
pictures here. You probably,
Wonderful.
can you move it faster?
Looks sort of like
well,
graves.
Janice is turning it.
Oh, okay. I thought you were doing it.
No.
So
Graves have the stuff carved in it, okay.
we were trying to mimic a tower look by having a tall,
Say, what,
You're doing the PowerPoint from your computer. You have to push play on your laptop.
you have to push play.
oh, okay.
I don't know if we should share these at the open session, the select board meeting, some pictures or not.
In our report, you know.
This is wonderful.
Mhm. Cool. That's really neat. And this is at the top?
Oh, here it is. Okay.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. So I have, to oh God, so I have to climb the, oh, look at it.
If you hit spacebar, will it just advance one?
That's
one
that's right. The road, right.
It's going now.
Okay, good.
That's much easier.
Okay, now that we're, now we're in the thing, okay.
Wow.
Now we're downtown, okay.
Those posts are not going to move. Those are
Wow.
the Camden National Bank people.
Mhm.
That's wonderful.
Oh, Mike did the cobblestones too, because there were some there from Camden National, but not enough to make it look right.
Great. Wow.
Tom Jackson. Tom's crew.
Nice.
Mike and Chris raking out afterwards.
Chris did a lot of that work.
Oh, yeah. geez. I was out there for
Now we're
15
back to
minutes,
Mount
yeah.
Betty again, okay.
Grass already grown back in.
That's it.
Great.
That's it. Anyway.
Wow. Great job. It's both so gorgeous. And with so much time put into both, to have them both be completed so close to one another,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing.
Oh, so glad to get that done.
And, you know, it's already, you can see people appreciating them. So,
It was in the newspaper,
job.
right? The Great
Yeah.
Fire District there was an article in the newspaper, the Camden Herald about it.
Yeah.
well, thank you very much. That's great.
Mhm.
I was, just a little side note, I came into town, it was pretty late at night, and I had to mail my ballots in the town office, and I went by and I parked down near the plaque. And then this guy, this is like at 11:30 at night, guy reading it, and we didn't even realize it, but there's a light pole right above it. So it's actually,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, you
Something we
didn't,
didn't see.
you didn't design that?
We didn't know.
so I chatted with him.
It's-
He's from
Wow,
Alabama.
it seems like it was.
And he said, that's so sad the town burned down.
At 11:30 at night.
Actually, just,
It's, anyway, it's been fun.
I think
I
just
mean,
about
it's-
every seaport town had a big fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, Belfast burned down.
Yeah.
Portland.
I used to live in Newburyport, it burned down.
Oh, yeah, we
We-
wouldn't have any of our parks if
We-
we hadn't had all these fires, then
Right.
that's the only way that Mrs. Bach was able to do everything she did, because just the clean slate. Um, Not that I,
Well, thank you both again for all your initiative, because, I mean, just taking it on and doing it
Yeah.
is the only way these things get done. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry it took so long, but I think
Oh,
hiatus was,
yeah.
we had a couple of years of
Kept
not
getting
much.
better.
we need a master list of all the things that you guys have done
Yeah.
to inspire the
Scaling
next
Park.
generation of,
Oh, there's a lot that can be done in town. I wanted to just
The
also,
Sailing Island Lighthouse.
There we go.
I'm just kidding. Oh, gee.
now that's on film forever. That's what we're gonna do. And
Yeah, Scaling Keeper's House, yeah, on Curtis Island. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Okay, well, moving on.
decided.
moving on.
Do you want to, is there anything to talk about Jacobs Ave or
There
Dable
there
Ave?
actually is this
Oh.
time.
Oh, okay.
So, but thank you so much for saying that you started in 2018, because I think that's about when I started on this. So we can say there were a few things that came in between, right?
Yeah.
I did go to this meeting for the Washington Park Historic District in Bath, and I talked to Ned Baxter, who was the man who was who had basically spearheaded this. And I also just, raised my hand and asked questions and listened to everything and I have a copy of their entire application, which is really interesting because they were applying from the standpoint of a district. They were applying from the standpoint of being a community that was instrumental in housing shipyard workers for the growth in shipbuilding to support the effort in World War I.
Mhm.
And that's what they used. And so their criteria for the National Register was associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, which is one of the criteria for us if we're looking at Jacobs Avenue as a planned community. We also have the architectural appropriateness. They actually, which was very interesting, mentioned that when they started, there was this whole discussion about whether these were Sears Kit or Montgomery Ward houses, which of course they are not. And, so we had a little back and forth about that. But he brought up a lot of things, and I've been corresponding with him since then, that a lot of questions that we still need to ask, I think, because the issue of who lived in these houses is instrumental to trying to determine why they were built the way they were. And we don't have those records because of what Ritterbusch's spouse did with his stuff. And I've combed the Ingraham records, and there's just not a whole lot. I'm planning to go back to the Camden newspaper because it wasn't digitized when I started, but I also have someone who's researching something else. And so she's looking for Jacobs Avenue at the same time and has come up with some things. But my hardest part is going to be figuring out who lived in those houses from 1917 to 1923, because they were built by a company and rented from 1917 to 1923.
Mhm.
And so to determine what their purpose was, you need to know who lived in them at that
Right.
time. And sometimes it's a mere mention of someone who lived at, and they always put the address in the newspaper in olden times, and someone who lived at 15 Jacobs Avenue and was throwing a birthday party for their child. And so now I have a name. So
Right.
that's kind of the thing that I'm doing now. I also got a little more thorough idea of the process, and we just kind of jumped over the informally figure out if owners are in agreement. But I've made a list of the owners that I know from having lived on Jacobs Avenue. So I think that I can go to them now, and at least 5 out of the 9, which is, it just has to be more than 50%, would be in agreement. And then he told me that he filled out these forms for Michael Gerber-Bain, and then Michael wrote the application. And I was like, oh, wow, that's great, because I have a lot of stuff I can give him. But then when we were corresponding, he said, I think Michael, I don't know if he does that for everybody. I think he did that for me because I was an individual. But now you've given me hope again, because you said since it was a committee doing it, he had to write it. So I think that possibly the actual writing part of it could get done by Michael, so long as we have all the information for him. And once he writes up the application, then he sends an official owner notification and request for owner approval. And that meeting I went to was actually part of that process of getting the official owner approval. And, there were, the main objections were just people saying, how is this going to affect my being able to
Right.
change my house? Interestingly enough, I have been troubled with how there's only 9 houses, and one of them is non-conforming. There are other houses that are on Jacobs Avenue, but they don't fit these criteria. And there are houses that are part of the Ritterbusch plan on Lime Rock, but they weren't built until the 1920s. And so trying to determine, exactly, and whether or not you list these as being on Jacobs Avenue, but they are non-conforming. They even listed in Bath, they listed garages. They had to list like every building, and most garages are non-conforming. So there are just little questions like that I'm turning to now. But frankly, I am at the point that I need, I guess I would call it a PAT scaling, to sit down with me and just let me kind of babble and brainstorm and make sure that I'm heading in the right direction. I've been doing this pretty separately.
Mhm.
And I just need somebody well-versed in the history to say, well, wait a minute, Anne, if you are going to start off your summary of significance with this, you really need to start off, a little bit earlier, or you need to make sure you include such and such. I think I'm kind of working as an island now, which I see worked very well for you.
Mhm.
But for me, I really need to have one or two people that I could just sit down with. I almost brought it today. I mean, I have a binder like this
Oh,
high,
geez.
but it was just too heavy to carry, and I usually walk. So, and so I'm just at the point that I know what my questions are, and I know what needs to be filled in, and I just need a few other eyes and ears.
Mm.
So that's where I am.
Does the town keep voting records that far back?
The best place,
Because that would
voting records, I
tell you.
don't.
at
Yes,
least- yeah.
let me show you the box of stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
I was also
because-
curious about the newspaper you mentioned.
Yeah.
What
Well,
year
the reason
was
I was
that?
doing that is because Ancestry.com, if I can find that the Grinnells were living at 15 Jacobs, I can go to the census
Mm.
and see. But the problem is,
Yeah.
no, that the census will work because it's 1920, and so most of the people live. And there are on some of the deeds houses that known as the such and such house. And
Mhm.
so I'm starting from there to see if they're known as
Mhm.
that because somebody lived there.
Right.
But there is even some disagreement on some of those, so.
Okay.
But voting
Wow.
records, yeah, that would be.
Mhm.
Oh, voting records like registered voters.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
you're saying.
No, no, not.
Wouldn't
no,
be any women, right?
You aren't allowed to keep who you voted for. I think.
Well,
Oh,
oh,
but,
yeah, geez.
but no, they should be, they should be for 1915, for
Katrina
example,
asked-
who's registered to vote.
Right.
Actually, and
And we have like, yeah, birth certificates and death certificates, and
yeah,
that's a whole town clerk
yeah.
thing that we've asked, well, yeah, we have.
Birth certificates, they don't have addresses necessarily. Right?
Yeah, I don't
I assume
think
you
so.
bent
But
Ken's ear
Ancestry,
about
yeah, is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing is though, I have never, I've been out to the Historic Society, but I have never looked to see what's in their records.
It's not made very accessible, it's not like it, because most of the time they just have displays there, but it's,
I mean, are there records that that I could go in and say, I'm researching this part of history and can I?
yes, right now there, because most of the time Susan Reedy is there, who we've, she, I believe, would help
Mhm.
you with that. She's been organizing everything. And a lot of the time you'll see, when she's there, the open flag
Okay.
is out.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's actually open a lot more right now than people
Yeah.
realize.
I'd like to go with you there too.
Okay.
Because
All right, yeah.
I have some things I'd like to look up. We could do it together.
Yeah.
And-
Well, my husband's having, excuse me, additional foot surgery in January, and he's non-weight bearing for 6 weeks. So I will be out of the house. Anything you want to do, because I already lived through that once, as did he.
That's a good time.
Yeah, yeah.
I have to
Okay.
run.
Okay.
Thank you, Allison.
But thank you so
Thank you
much,
very
Take
much.
care.
everyone. And
Can I officially say thank you to you for what you did for Jacobs Avenue, not Jacobs Avenue, Pearl Street for Halloween?
Oh,
All of my neighbors now know if you want anything done, you talk to Allison. Thank
Oh,
you.
Well, sometimes you
Yeah.
have to send multiple
No,
emails. But,
within 1 hour, Allison.
oh, well, I personally think that the Pearl Street thing's gotten out of control with trick or treating anyway.
Mhm.
So. like,
Yeah.
I remember. a
Did you
time-
pick the picture? Because I,
You know what? That was, Audra did that, and I believe she did that with AI, some kind of.
that picture was brilliant. They posted a bit because we're still just a mess.
Right.
And they didn't want all these people coming to trick or treat. And I had called the town and different things and it was kind of up in the air. I mean, some people were saying that the road was going to be closed off and other people were saying that it wasn't. So I emailed you And whoever put the picture up, thank you so much, because it was this picture it was like a little painting of this
like-
absolutely derelict looking street. And it said, Pearl Street is dangerous or whatever for trick or treating this year. And because it was, I mean, you have to step over the new curb,
Yeah.
goes down 10 inches to get to our yard. And these little kids trying to step over these curbs. So it was it was such a wonderful graphic representation. And there was some little jack-o'-lanterns, but it just looked like the street was falling apart in this picture. So
Yeah, it's like one of the Town of Camden's like most popular posts in a while. People
really?
And you post select board agendas and all this
It was so-
information. People are like, blah, you never see, like two people see it.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, like just an update on Halloween, and people are like,
But it was
we're
brilliant.
not really trying to make our Facebook page something that's like super active anyway, because that has its own problems. But
No.
I think it was all in the works anyway. I mean, it was mostly just that. I think I said something like, could we send out a text message? Because it's confusing. Normally we close Pearl Street in order to
Yeah.
facilitate more people going there. So we're like, the decision was to not close Pearl Street, which then sends mixed messages. Because
Yeah, and it ended up being
we're trying
closed,
not to
yeah.
invite people to Pearl Street.
Mhm.
And anyway.
Well,
yeah.
it did work because normally we give out like 1,200 pieces of candy and we gave out about 400. So, I
Oh.
mean, it did work.
Good, yeah.
Good.
That's
Great.
kind of-
Well,
I
Thank you.
have a
Um,
question for Ann.
any other new business or do we move to adjourn?
This is,
I
actually, Jacob's,
Oh.
Jacob really, it sounds interesting.
Is that Rhonda?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I have a question for Ann.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to help you get your thoughts together about your project is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
How many houses are there that you're concerned with?
Well, the ones that would be contributing are 8.
8, okay. And have you done deed searches on all of them?
Yes, I have all the deed information on all. of them. That's what this,
Okay.
part of this big binder
But
is.
that doesn't help you figure out who was there?
No,
Because they were
because the-
renting them?
The houses were not sold until 1923, but they were occupied from 1917.
Okay, okay.
So, and one of them, the owner has shown me where it looks like it was divided into 8 rooms as if it was housing for, maybe people working in the quarry.
Mhm.
Right.
But other ones seem to have been people just renting them that were, maybe it was the mailman, who was a postal worker. So it's hard to,
Yeah,
I'm trying to put together a picture of, what was in the minds of the developer too,
Mhm.
that they built this development to rent
yeah.
to people.
Okay,
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk to you and maybe we could figure out how to get to that
Mhm.
Yeah.
level of detail.
Yeah, in fact, when you get back, if you have a big
Okay.
dining room table, that would be the best part.
I do, right now my
Yeah.
kitchen's on it, but,
Right.
Thank you, Rhonda. Okay.
okay.
Chris,
Yes.
Yeah.
One more thing. Do you think the orientation manual for new members, even though it's expired and you were not thinking that it was a great,
Yeah.
a great thing,
Yeah.
product, I mean, at least it would be something for our 2 new members if you
Ah.
want me to send it to them or not.
Go ahead and send it.
I was doing some editing to it. I was trying to
Oh,
clean
good.
it up.
Oh,
but
good.
It's a lot of stuff.
Send it to me
Yeah.
when you feel like it.
Okay.
Well, never
No,
mind.
it's a
Um,
great
Yeah.
point.
Jacobs,
Because,
It
yeah, I
may
think
be
it
really
helps
quite
if they have
unique,
something.
because I think most of the kit houses
begin
were
with.
bought by people who were going to live in
I
it.
was trying to
These
take
were
all the
not kid
out.
houses.
Oh, they were-
out-of-date
okay,
names
they
and
weren't kit,
replace them with the
but they
current-
were-
yeah.
No, they were
The
actually.
last thing I want to say for Anne is I just heard a quote from David Gran, who wrote Children of the Flower Moon. They've just made a movie about the Oklahoma Native Americans and everything. And he said, if you're going to be a writer, an observer of history, you must be obsessed. And I
Yeah.
think because everything is a puzzle,
Mhm.
and that's so true.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
so they
Yeah.
were,
It's-
then what,
you,
yeah,
yeah.
And from, one of the times you reported, or we probably read one of your early editions, we said, that's ready to go.
Yeah.
I need somebody saying that too.
No, I mean, it's so well written and
Mhm.
worded and I don't know. I think you can overdo these things. I mean, I know too.
And I know,
Believe me, that is.
I just did a
You're
little
too close
history
to it.
for,
Let's end the meeting first and then we can talk. Okay, so is our meeting officially adjourned?
Yes.
Rhonda, we'll see you soon.
All right, great.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Good to see you all.
Yeah, same.
Bye-bye.
So I